we would maybe every other time have a spoon bending party. And those are always a lot of fun. And a lot of people can do it. Some people can't. And it gets to what I do think is so crucial, which is why. It's this inner programming, which starts when you're a baby. And there are blocks that get put up. Your mother yells at you, maybe when you do something psychic. Hey, I saw Grandpa over there, or whatever. But there's a lot of negative stuff that I would call psychic blocks. And that's what you need to remove. And then you can get to this place you keep talking about, which is wonderful, because I believe there's a spiritual soul, which is separate from the physical soul. The spiritual soul is indeed infinite. It knows about the physical soul, and it can communicate with the physical soul, say, doing healing.
Welcome to the Consciousness of the Way. I am your humble servant and Sifu, Taoist Master San Qing, and I have, as always, another incredible guest, another gift from the universe, and an online, now real-time friend that we've been building a bond with for quite some time, and I'm very grateful to welcome to the podcast Marty Rosenblatt. How are you, my dear friend?
I'm doing great, and it's a real pleasure to be here with you, San.
And I want to furthermore add that Marty is a physicist and a seeker of many different things, and has a long list of incredible academic accomplishments. One of a master's that he received from UCLA. And I just want to start, my dear friend. You okay? I want to start with just a little bit about yourself for the audience, about how you got to this point.
Okay, I was always interested in science fiction. I think a lot of people who get into the psychic area and the physics area love science fiction, because science fiction talks about many views of the future. The psychic views of the future in books like Isaac Asimov's book, and right now the book, which, God, I'm blanking on its name, I'm sorry, but it has a youth go to Mars, first trip to Mars. This one was an important one to me. You know, I'm getting older, and I'm hoping that I'm not losing some of it, and I'm sorry to waste your time with this. Now, Stranger in a Strange Land. It was a great book. There's a mission to Mars. It crash lands. The only person that survives is a baby. The Martians are the way we might be psychically and spiritually a million years from now. They take precognition, psychokinesis, conversation with the dead for granted. This is how this guy grows up. 20 years later, another spaceship comes and they take him back to Earth. He's the stranger in a strange land. For me, that was an amazing book, because they talked about all of the psychic phenomenon. Precognition was one of them, which was always fascinating to me, because as a physicist, precognition blows the paradigm of time. Getting information from the future and bringing it back to the present, that's impossible. But thoughts like that were important to me. And then just to make a leap to the Monroe Institute, I was always interested in this stuff. There were books by Hal Puthoff in particular, he's one of the great ones, and Russell Targ, and they talked about being trained and doing training with others at the Monroe Institute. So I took a class there, and it was clearly a spiritual class, but they did some remote viewing. And then I started my own company. This is what I wanted to do. And so Physics Intuition Application was the first company I started in this area. And we started doing precognition and other psychic things. And I wrote in those days I called it an e-zine. It was like a blog. And I've been doing that ever since. I, started this Physics Intuition Applications before I retired. But then when I retired, this is what I do full time, working harder than I was, quote, really working, but I really enjoy this work.
Wow. Wow, my friend. You touch on things that are explained within the physics world, within the science world, more common or not, precognition is still not a definition for the average person to go, well, what exactly does that mean? And so I love to give people a taste of the old proverbial paranormal dragon that people chase after when they cross over from intellect to intuitive, and they find themselves in this place of, I heard grandma, I got a gut feeling, I was able to predict this happened. I thought about someone and instantly, like, they called me. And it's just like how we got a charge of energy right now, just from that specific peak of the conversation, this symbiotic sort of like oscillating thing that's going on, because we're all interconnected. And so you have this feeling. Now, I really love this because within remote viewing, and I have many dear friends that are remote viewers. One, quite well, Gail Hasten. And, I've been teaching people sort of like what they would call clear senses. I just call them sensory perception. Actually, it's just throw a blanket over it for decades. And so this idea of the ideomotor response, the ideogram, the idea that you're getting this information, you're communicating between your conscious and unconscious and accessing something that would potentially be impossible in an intellect world of just the framework of what we call a 3D reality for all those people out there that want to mention a multiverse or a dimensional shift. So tell us more about how deep you go into that aspect of your research, your validation, because that's the most important thing for the seeker, is validating that.
In fact, and that's what, as a scientist, got me into precognition very early on, because you, in principle, can validate it. You can make a prediction about the future, and if it's true or false, you write it down. You get, hundreds of these, and you can see if you're doing better than chance. And we focused on binary, where there are two choices. We did a lot of work with the stock market, parts of the stock market. So the two choices would be up and down. And the way we do it is we have two pictures, one randomly associated with up, the other randomly associated with down. And we ask our viewer to describe and sketch the photo site. We call them photo sites because they're more than just pictures. They're much more than two-dimensional when you get into it in a psychic way. And they describe it. Then a judge, and we've used lots of different judging forms, but a judge then says, oh, look, this is most like this one. And only then does he look and report, oh, that's associated with up. And then someone can make an up trade. So having done that, if there was no precognition, you'd be 50-50. In fact, for the longest time, we were up at 60 to 65% consistent. But doing this for many years, it actually started going down. There's something like a boredom effect. Uh, I know. And I'm actually working on that, working on kind of a new approach, but I'm also just because I guess it's time getting involved in some of these other psychic things like psychokinesis, like um, well, that's kind of the next one because it's also easily demonstrable when you do it. The thing moves, you know, and there's a guy out there that does that, and I'm getting interested in that as well. But I'm not giving up on the psychokinesis. It's just that I want to do better. Only getting up to 60, 65%. You can make money, but money is not the goal. The goal is to educate and have people say, you know what, there really is something significant out there. And so I'm really working to get to 80%. And there's a fellow out there, Dr. Ed May, who was with the Stargate type program, the DIA type program forever. And he has an approach that he says does 80%, and he seems willing to give it to me. So that's going to be my next thrust to try to get to 80% on that. So,
Wow.
yeah, yeah. I know.
No, go ahead, my friend.
I was just going to say, I know Ed May goes way back to the early 70s. You might have heard of Hal Puthoff and Russ Targ. I met them in the mid 70s, and this is just an interesting story. I'm in the defense industry. Okay, that's the basic industry that I worked in my whole career, and we did simulations of things, including nuclear weapon effects, hypervelocity impact, things which would be of interest to various government agencies. But since I had contact with the DIA, um, um, and I saw this thing, a paper that Puthoff and Targ did, and it included remote viewing. I went to them and I said, "Hey, you guys should see this. This is kind of incredible." Turned out they were funding it. I didn't know that at the time. And they sent me to SRI, Stanford Research Institute. And I met these two guys. They are so impressive. Um, and I started doing webinars and workshops with Russ Targ. So Russ Targ and I did quite a few of them where we taught people about remote viewing and consciousness and psychic phenomena and things like that. And that just kept me motivated in this whole field. And ever since then, I've been doing, you know, conferences and webinars and educating people.
It's amazing how you once you get bitten by the spiritual dragon in Taoist seeker's path, we would identify it as that,
Mm-hmm.
looking for the greater understanding of all things, the nature of reality, your simulation, your truth. And when I tell people your truth is the only truth you need to be concerned with, people get a little concerned. It's the truth. When you go deeper into your field of understanding where the numbers lie, you find answers to the very understanding of what the truth is for a physicist. And then they try and relay it to this sort of like metaphysical sort of messaging, which I'm more familiar at sharing with people. And so you have this identification of these sort of what they call ideograms, or your relationship with understanding how to communicate with this higher source of consciousness to obtain a result that is repeatable. And that's something that I find quite interesting, because that's something that from an alchemical response, from a Taoist cultivation perspective, is critical to rolling out many of the things that we do within that energetic potential. So when you're able to have a visceral validation of manifestation, what Taoists call magic, healing, and it's real within a 3D reality, in the sense that it actually happened. It's more than just you and a potential psychotic episode. That you're actually, this is this repeatable thing that Marty's talking about, is being able to make it a probability, as our dear friend Tom Campbell would say, a higher probability with your attention to this exercise, this cultivational practice. Do you use any sort of methods that will give you a higher rate of result, even though you're through your own admission, you're around 65% has been your best so far, which is pretty amazing in my opinion.
Yeah, it is.
And for me, when I witness physical healings, I measure my brain waves, and they sort of stay within anywhere from 100 up to 400 hertz is sort of like the sort of like sweet spot. And so that goes totally against a lot of things where people, and I've never really looked deeper, but Hawkins had some type of like consciousness scale that he's mentioned. I don't know whether you're familiar with Stephen Hawkins. He mentioned some type of consciousness scale. Wasn't really looking deeper into it. And I'm not sure whether that's a Hertz thing or how you're validating it, but the emotional content absolutely can be a distraction from your ability to hit the center point. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, first, when you're talking about it's inside, you reminded me of what I think is one of your greatest true statements. And I'm not sure I'll be able to quote it exactly, but it says, "You are the creator, the master,
The keeper,
and keeper of your soul." Right? Was it soul?
Yeah. Reality, soul, the whole
Reality.
thing.
Okay. I've been saying, and for a long time, that you are God. I am God. I like and we're saying the same thing in the way, and people have a hard time taking that on because it requires full responsibility, and and that is tough. So that's my first response when you brought up, reality. And I love that. It's just a beautiful way to say it. And I've now repeated it already several times. We do healing as well. Precognition is related to healing in the sense that you predict with intention, let's say a picture you're going to see in the future, and then you get the feedback. The feedback is key. In fact, that's called retro causality. So the precognition is pre-knowing, and then you get your retro causality. Well, think about it with healing. You have an intention to heal, and then sometime in the future, you get healed. You're somewhat better. And you remember when you had the healing session. Now, I know you do healing with others. My focus is on self-healing. I think you would even say that you're motivating the body's internal deep self to heal himself, herself. So that's our philosophy. So we do that with healing. Now, I'm trying to remember what else you touched on. Well, I think that's enough. The healing and the connection with the precognition, that's a big deal. Other psychic stuff, like I guess you connect up with dead souls and talk to them.
That's kind of like my forte. Is my light speed remembrance of my relationship with Lao Tzu as a facet of what we call the diamond of perfection, the mother, the source of all things. So when you get into this communication with what you consider the spirit world, it's a whole different ballgame. And that, again, returns back to this understanding that you have with this precognitive model, because you are receiving information that can be validated. I really find it interesting. There's a lot of people that spend their time as the fortune teller, and it's never validated. It's like, okay, in 5 years this is going to happen, and so there's no dialogue of potential that can be validated for now. It's just in the future, so far in the future, that just give me my $20 for my fortune telling and move right along. And I feel that in this space that you have been crafting and creating for your career, and how exciting it is, it needs to be validated in a much shorter, more appropriate time, where someone doesn't lose motivation, lose enthusiasm, or lose, their mind, because there's no way for them to determine whether it is true or not. And I feel like the energetic potential is so important that within the Taoist alchemy path, cultivating the infrastructure of that within the physical body is critical to this validation, that you can tap into it at will. So, PK touch is I've always pursued a lot of like magicians, mentalists, because I find it interesting. They're the most skeptical, negative, miserable people that don't believe this stuff, yet they make a business out of selling it, the illusion of it. Yet I'm like, I can teach you how to actually do this stuff. Oh no, I'd rather just be a manipulator and perhaps hypnotize a few people, and they can have a reverse hallucination, and just that's good enough for me. I don't really need to actually tap into it. And it's funny because they get a little squeamish. See, one of my favorite things to do, and I haven't done it in a while, I need to definitely do it again, and I'm going to record it, is I'll take someone down to, because I'm out of Nevada here, so I'm around Las Vegas. I'll take someone down to the MGM, and there's, it's a 5,000 square foot hotel, and I'll get them to take a quarter. And now this is very interesting. You can give me your insight into this. They have the quarter, and how I look at it from a cultivational, spiritual teachers training, and all the ancient stuff that I teach people from Taoism. They obtain the visual effect of the quarter. They then go and put it somewhere in the hotel. They come back, and then I read the ideomotor response of their body without hands-on. A lot of people will use like muscle testing and things of that nature. I'm attuned enough where I can obtain a resonance that is consistent, and I'll basically I'll have them with my guidance and follow them right back to where the coin is. And people go, whoa, that is just insane. Well, not really. It's very common for, people that are in this space. If you're holding someone, you can feel it a lot easier from a visceral energetic potential through the body. As the ideomotor response comes out, you see where there's resistance or there's flow. There's no resistance. People use this technique to get answers from the other side, or they're unconscious, however you want to put it. But it seems to blow people's minds when I do it hands-free. Now, this is the type of stuff where you get into like body dowsing, and you are able to pick up power centers, vortices, things of that nature. These are very tangible and very real when you become more energetically sensitive. What is your experience with this type of stuff, even though it goes right into the precognitive like model?
Right. As you said, they're all connected. What have I done that's similar to that? Besides the precognition, ritual causality, I have done PK with a fellow who has you put a aluminum thing on a pin, so it's very easy to move, and you put a covering on it so it isn't local air, and by golly, you can get it to move, you can get it to rotate the other way. He does it really at will. I think you're at the point with things that you do. And when we were with him, I was doing it at will too. Come back home and try to do it. I can't do it at will again. If I wanted to do the training, I might be able to. But this raises what I think is a very interesting point, and I'd like your feedback on it. As you discussed, it's increasing the probability of success. Like I'm now going for 80%. Why isn't it 100%? You know, and maybe a person like you could do 100% at remote viewing, because I think it's blocks. There's fear. Imagine if you could do 100%. I mean, most people would consider you a freak. Okay, go ahead. Yeah, give me your.
No. I mean, you bring up such a great point, but I mean, it comes back to the simplicity of the labyrinth of linguistics, right? How are you programming? I mean, I think the audience needs to understand. You know, we're programming the RAS to give us a prescribed response of what is happening, right? This is a deeper understanding within this layered precognitive model that you're having a.
What is RAS?
A reticular activative system.
Okay.
So within the brain, you are layering out. You are front loading the outcome. So some people would perceive it as like deja vu, or my goodness, all of a sudden, you're giving your conscious ability the access to create a framework that will then identify everything that you desire. So if you buy a yellow car, all of a sudden you see yellow cars everywhere. I mean, it literally is that instantaneous. So we have this sort of deeper understanding of this phenomenon, which is really not. I believe you and I are pursuing this journey within this lifetime, helping people understand that returning back to the center point of all things means that you are able to access this, and your probability goes way up. And so, I will do that. I mean, I believe you at one point used remote viewing for, determining the outcome of gambling and things of that nature within it. I do it occasionally, and I don't do it like, oh, I need to go. But when I get down there, what happens is I'll pick a really benign sort of like what is it? Gambling. Well, I don't even know what
game, roulette.
Yeah, a game. So I'll pick roulette specifically because it's under the radar. And what happens is I start winning, and the probability of that is like not good. How does he pick 6 black, 2 red, another 4 black, 7 red? And when I start getting up there, my personality gets sweaty. And so I start thinking they're looking at me. What's going on? How can this guy rig this thing? And then I'll shut it down. But once you flow into it, this is a thing where we speak on telekinesis, psychokinesis, precognition. There's an energetic potential that needs to be identified, because that's when you understand when you're there. And so spoon bending, which is a very common thing within our space, is being able to enter into that very moment and bend reality, as Albert Einstein would say, is very tangible and very real. And it's not just some goofy sort of sleight of hand of some magician that wants you to believe that they can bend metal. You can actually do that. But what I've discovered over all these years is it's no different than physical healing. And so once you hit that center point, you immediately have this visceral feeling, and all things collapse. There is no space or time, space. It collapses, and you have this effect where, my goodness, it's like no place, no person, no thing. And that charge you and I are getting right now is that validating effect, that chill, that we are right there. But the result is you bend a spoon. Now, of course, the infantile version, or the intermediate, or the baseline would be expressing a feeling of this tactile metal against your flesh, one end of the spoon in each hand, and then you focus your attention on it, and you don't even have to look at it. It will mold and melt before your very eyes, and it's like a bam, the Death Star moment from the Star Wars, where you hit that center point. Now, human flesh is the same. Like, how I see it is the flesh will actually wiggle and alter and reset itself until it returns to its original state, being not altered. Now, this is a phenomenon, and I've spent much time speaking with many people that are involved in telekinesis. Sean McNamara, I'm sure you're familiar with him, dear friend of mine. This is something that everyone validates. I've had that feeling of bending metal, but I never thought that I could apply it to flesh, to manifestation, to all types of things. And there is really no, and you brings us back to what you said, which is, okay, there's a block. What is stopping me from 100%? I'm at 65. I validated 65. Why not 100? Now, this is this veil between the conscious and unconscious process, and the linguistics speak on all that. I mean, I don't know how deep you've ever looked into, this offering of, Tony Robbins, godfather of NLP, but there's a clear evidence of how you can alter someone's state with the linguistics. What are your thoughts on that?
No, NLP is very powerful. I've only looked at it briefly, but enough to know it's very powerful. I've never quite applied it. However, spoon bending, before COVID, for many years, we used to do 2 conferences, workshops in Vegas. We would go to one of the hotels there, and we would maybe every other time have a spoon bending party. And those were always a lot of fun. And a lot of people can do it. Some people can't. And it gets to what I do think is so crucial, which is why. It's this inner programming, which starts when you're a baby. And there are blocks that get put up. Your mother yells at you, maybe when you do something psychic. Hey, I saw Grandpa over there, or whatever. But there's a lot of negative stuff that I would call psychic blocks. And that's what you need to remove. And then you can get to this place you keep talking about, which is wonderful, because I believe there's a spiritual soul, which is separate from the physical soul. The spiritual soul is indeed infinite. It knows about the physical soul, and it can communicate with the physical soul, say, doing healing. Okay? But it's this process of the infinite spiritual soul, which can do anything. Come on, bending spoons, that's trivial. For precognition, that's trivial. It knows what picture, it sees the future, it knows the future, it knows the past. But communicating it, and it's got to go through the physical body. It's got to get into the neurons of the brain. And that involves a person. And cleaning up that person is a spiritual process, I think.
I would have to agree. I mean, some of the fundamental things that we start as a Taoist seeker or a Taoist in training is to start developing the foundation. The first thing you need to move off the table is your emotions don't control you, you control your emotions. And people are like, whoa, if you even lay down something as simple as a hermetic principle of everything is mental, which within Taoism, we talk about this, the bellows, so everything is contracting, expanding. You are all things and nothing at the same time. And people are like, that makes no sense to me. And then you're looking for that center point within Taoism is yin and yang. Between the breath in and the breath out, we are realized as the Wu Ji. That's the Death Star moment to access the mother of all things, the Tao. And so, with the mother, there must be a father. Of course there is. But that's the reflection. That's the power of what we speak of within a physics model, within a spiritual model, within a Taoist model, within a biblical model. We start to understand that there's fundamentals there that are really replicating this messaging that goes so deep into this subatomic level of this humanness. And we speak of it as, we call this the barometer, the tuning fork of your reality. It has to go somewhere. I mean, just as you spoke of how important it is, the brain identifying that, it doesn't become realized until it's a visceral, kinesthetic feeling. It has to be validated by you. So from your mind, which is all things, to actually a physical response can be problematic for many people until otherwise noted, until they develop the skill, a skill of being in tune, of creating that fluidity, right? So do you use a method of your own training?
I don't know how to answer that. I am, and I always have meditated. So meditation is big. I am into your Tao Te Ching. I'm up to verse 57. So, and I love it. It's beautiful. And yet my challenge being so intellectual, being in physics makes you so intellectual. And when I meditate, I do drop it most of the time, but guess what? It always goes off and you have to come back. That's typical. I have always said, and it is still my desire, to have one foot in the spiritual, one foot in the material. And I just do these things I don't want to say my own way, but in many ways it is my own way. When I meditate, I meditate. When I do remote viewing, I do something like controlled remote viewing. When I've done spoon bending, I give a lot of focus to it, shout at it, and then ignore it. And then you can feel it get soft. So there are those kind of standard techniques, but I'm looking to do more. And I think your Tao, and you say Tao sometimes for Tao.
Tao. It's spelt Tao, but it is pronounced de. So when you get into the inner workings of Mandarin, the pronunciation using things like pinyin can give you a greater understanding of how to pronounce the words. Even though it's spelt with a T, it's actually
pronounced Tao.
Yeah. But I will go in between Tao and Tao depending upon what I'm feeling like. However I feel today, it will be represented. But I mean, that's that key component, is that feeling, right?
You are so cool, San. You don't imagine a master being a real person. You know what I mean? I'll do Tao, I'll do Tao. You're not hung up with what you might imagine some people being, where everything's got to be rigid. But of course, your Tao Te Ching makes that clear. And nothingness. You use the word nothingness a lot. I don't want to share this as egotistical, but there's another point of view which I think is saying the same thing, and I'd like some of your feedback on this. Consciousness is fundamental. Do you agree with that?
Yeah.
Okay. Most people won't. That doesn't register.
Well, I think for a lot of physicists, that could be problematic. I mean, I think you've stepped further over the line. A lot of physicists are not going to just accept that. I mean, you and Tom are in the same space, but
yes,
yes,
and materialistic people would have a lot of trouble with that. Okay, from that, And going back to even before I got into the Monroe Institute, which had to be maybe 20 years ago now, I don't know exactly, I started developing a model which involves the universe of collective consciousness. Anything consciousness touches, any thought, any emotion, is in the universe of collective consciousness. Now, notice the universe of collective consciousness contains everything past, present, and future. ET's out there, they're conscious, it's in there as well. So everything is in there. Nothing can be outside because imagine, oh, here's a thought that's outside. Immediately it's inside because you had a conscious thought of it. Okay? So this is the universe of collective consciousness. And I've done a lot with that. I've done remote viewing simulations. Here you are at one time doing a remote viewing session, but you are entangled through the universe of collective consciousness to the feedback session, and they share information. Now, I want to connect this up with nothingness. This thing outside is nothing. You guys talk about a lot coming from nothingness. Well, in many ways, that agrees. You know, the thought goes and it goes into nothingness. But let's talk about God. God is in the universe of collective consciousness because it's an idea, it's a thought. I have a whole list of words equivalent to God. I don't know if you would say Tao. Tao, is that equivalent to God, would you say?
Yeah, in essence, that's that
Close.
would be the same construct. I mean, it's all things.
Okay,
Yeah.
let me go one step further. There's a fellow named Gödel, a great German mathematician. He proved that within any, now he did this mathematically, so it was within any mathematical construct, but everything is sort of mathematical. Quantum mechanics is mathematical. There are propositions which you cannot prove or disprove. You cannot know them. He proved that. So within the integer model, I think there are things about the rational numbers model, fractions and stuff like that, that you couldn't prove until you went to a bigger system. So there always seem to be bigger systems. And in one of my slides, I show God outside this UCC, which contains everything. But little God is, one of those things that is bigger than our current understanding. And we can't understand it, but it's likely there because of Gödel. They keep getting bigger and bigger and more encompassing.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with you. I mean, how we look at it from a Taoist perspective is perfection is the mother. The mother, your as a dear friend of mine, a Buddhist monk would say, Martin, the dukkha is the distortion of this reality, this 3D reality, is your attention, intention, turning light into wave to matter to particle realized as what we perceive as our reality. But your attention, intention is forming these distorted, resonating sort of evidence of energy. So energy is being concocted within this simulation of your journey, and you're creating that. So you're cutting from the cloth of perfection. So perfection is all things. That's the mother. Now, when people distort their reality by just being present, now you have to return back to it. How do you find this substantive substance that you create that is not from the electromagnetic spectrum? This is what we call chi. This is what we call Tao. And then all of a sudden, miracles start taking place. When you are attuned to that, so someone they've generated energy from this very experience. The energy has a vibration. The vibration has a frequency. If met with a resonance, most manifestation teachers in 2024 would say, if you hold that resonance, it will be yours. Oh, yes, it will. And that's a sales pitch that a lot of people tend to peddle all over the place as to how you acquire your wildest dreams and turn it into reality. And in some ways, the simplicity of what I like to call the parking ferry is evidence of that. That's a very quick exercise that you can remove from emotional content, this precognitive experience, where I tell people, take a moment. You're driving somewhere. Don't tell your friends or family that are in the car. Just in your mind, assume you're going to have a parking space out the front of wherever it is. And of course, without the emotional content, without the pressure of judgment, you've created this acceptance that this will become so. And it turns up. And at the first time, it's like, it's just a coincidence. It's out the front. There's always going to be a parking space. Then all of a sudden, once you do it 47 times, the human being moves away from what they perceive as true and then goes, wow, this is going into the intuitive, paranormal, supernatural type of thing. It's no longer the mundane 9 to 5, get up, go to sleep, left and right. I've found something that repeats itself. What are your thoughts on that?
We call it parking karma. I use it all the time. I guess both of us have been around long enough that this stuff just so overlaps, and we know so many of the same things. Jeff Mishloff?
Yes, I would love to at some point get together with him.
He won, ready for this, $500,000 by winning a contest which was basically prove that the soul is real. And he went through reincarnation, precognition. He went through like 6 major things: getting in touch with spirits, the plasma stuff, which people claim come during the table move. Anyway, he did them all, at least all that I had heard about before, and no new ones. I mean, there are only so many that are out there, and they're all good, valid, it seems. Now, sometimes people are charlatans and all of that, but there's always seems to be some truth in the ones that we talk about. And I get disappointed sometimes in how slow the education process is, especially in the scientists. Scientists were taught to believe you do double and maybe triple tests where 3 people don't know, and you do all of these very complicated tests to make sure that your results are valid. All of that has been done, and they still won't believe it. And I think they won't believe it because of fear. They know that even precognition, forget all the other ones, if precognition is true, the world is not the same. They have to acknowledge a paradigm shift. They have to acknowledge that their linear world isn't so. And what are the implications of that? And fear is a basic, and I think it's one of the biggest blocks. I don't think I have a lot of fear in me, but I think it shows up, like when I'm doing remote viewing sometimes, and I don't do a really good session. Now, why was that? And sometimes I don't know. Anyway, I don't want to ramble on and on. The key word here is paradigm shift causes fear.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I mean, it comes in all different forms. You put it into this thing, and I mean, the emotional content again is the ground zero for your journey as a Taoist seeker. You must handle your business, and so creating the substance plasma, as you speak of, the energetic potential that is so palpable that there's no doubt in your mind. Now, this is the thing that comes with OBEs, remote viewing. You create this plasma, this substance through cultivation, and within Taoism we call it chi packing. And you will have a very clear understanding. A lot of people get delusional when they have this sort of delusions, as I call it, delusions of grandeur. When you ascend to the highest point, you lose all form of everything. I keep reminding people, you're recording it somewhere. You may say, I don't feel my body, but I feel moving through a mountain. It's all coming from this tuning fork, my dear friend. You're still having the experience, and it's all being recorded so that you can recall it as you return back to what you perceive as, the 3D reality, and it's not, boundless and limitless as it was through your OBE, your remote viewing experience. The whole point of this is so critical, is being able to access the substance so that you can move things on and around and in and out of your experience at will, and you can validate it. It's self-realized. And this is where Taoist alchemy comes in and is second to none, because you can separate electric from magnetic and do all these funny, awesome sort of paranormal things and shock people with electric charges and levitate. Never got into the levitation. I've met several people in my lifetime that have done it, and they're Kundalini masters that will, to my own admission, I will say they didn't weigh more than $150, maybe even 120. I'm a stouty, thicker guy that, I'm in my mind, as you would say, the block. It just doesn't make sense to me to focus my attention to be weightless. It doesn't have any. Now, if I witnessing physical healing, mental, emotional, physical stuff, that gets me all warm and fuzzy. And I think perhaps from the understanding of say a Tom Campbell model, is you put into this or just something as a psychological model, the RAS, you feed the system and it gives you back whatever you are looking for. And so for me, that's something that I've repeated for many decades, is the physical healing and witnessing it. It's so exciting. And, these are the things that get me warm and fuzzy. Now, the truth is the potential, which I call sensory perception, is unlimited. It's up to your imagination, in my opinion. And so you really can get into anything and everything, and you must be able to cultivate it or repeat it. And that's something that I find most people don't have a handle on. And that's why Taoist practices is so critical.
How do you get, you use the word repeatability a lot. And that's one of the reasons a lot of people don't believe in precognition. It doesn't work all the time. It must be phony.
Right.
But you are talking about repeatability, and you've talked about a couple of times sort of a place, and it's obviously not a physical place, in your soul, which feels right. You're there, and from there, you can do anything. You give an intention to it. How do you get there repeatably? And yet you seem to do that.
Well, that comes down to the method. It comes down to the cultivational practices. That's why Taoism, like alchemy, is second to none. And very few people start with this. Now, it's been bastardized over the decades. You had a few, and I'm just going to use some really not so nice words, but, hacks that have put out material that, this is Taoist alchemy. And there's a lot of, there's components to it that are missing. Now, you and I can talk about things, and, there's this relationship that you have, even by you delving into the Tao Te Ching, the Tao Te Ching, you're experiencing something. Looking at your energetic profile, I see there's a calming within your heart. There's something that you find this stillness when you read this material, whether you read it or you embody it. Within Taoism, we call it the magical register. These are incantations. These are potentials. So there are levels of potential within that incantation, and it has a frequency with it. So when you read the Tao Te Ching that I gave you, it is transcribed from Lao Tzu. That is not my words. That's not my information. It's his information. And so I sat down with him, and this is the part where a lot of people get, what? Well, all I do is I'm the catalyst and conduit to his messaging. I claim to know nothing. I'm as dumb as rocks. The information comes through as what someone would call the Akashic records, things of that nature, and it's put into print. And I could sit there without any food or water indefinitely, and my teachers that I channel will give me information nonstop. Like, so there's the fundamentals of the stuff that I've learned from a lineage perspective as a Taoist priest, which is very, very powerful stuff. But then when you add the insight of a greater knowing, which within spiritual walking today would be Akashic records, holds of a mente, something of that nature, the source of information, God, universe. When you get that, and as you put it, you're able to validate the information, it becomes real. So what's the fastest way to validate it? Is what does it give? What experience are you getting from it? From an experiencer that goes beyond just the intellect, you're having this visceral experience. When we hit certain points through this conversation today, both of us are experiencing this expansion of what could be energetic potential.
Mm-hmm.
And it's happening viscerally. This tuning fork is identifying it. You don't have to think about it. It's just there. And like right now, the same thing. We're having this aha moment, and it comes in a chill, an expansion, a feeling that is undeniable. Does that make sense?
Yes. I mean, and this is, we're talking deep stuff, and it makes sense. Your channeling is kind of amazing, getting to this spot where, and I want you to know, Joe McMonagle, who I'm sure you heard of, he used different words. He used cool down, and he could get to a place where he felt he was at the quote, what they call target. And training yourself to get that feeling, though he acknowledged it didn't work all the time. He was very happy when it worked 80% of the time, 90% of the time. So, maybe that's close enough for repeatability. Though if I believe that, then I won't go for the 100% of the time.
You bring such a good point, Marty, because I really believe the nurturing of my imagination since I was a young boy consciously has made this, and no limitation. From a parental guidance perspective, my mother's limitation, being raised by a single parent, was, son, anything you put your mind to, it will be realized. That was it. That's all it is. But then I went off to the races and in just embraced pop culture and movies and just what potential is out there from an imagination perspective. Now, I briefly have a recall of when I was 3 or 4 where I could see through my hand into walls. These are things that were giving me identification of what was to come in my journey as I continued to unravel this incarnation and realize, what am I, who are we really? And so do you get into past life information? Have you ever tapped into that at any point, or do you use it as a validation for anything, or even thought about it?
I thought about it a lot. I believe that it happens to certain people. It's not of great interest to me.
Yeah.
It's just not of great interest to me. I'm focused on this life. I connect up more and more as I'm getting older. Maybe that's why, with my parents. But no, I'm definitely much more focused with this life in my meditations, and I won't share the details, but I have, uh, I don't know if you've ever heard of a guy named Bankston. He
No.
worked with rats, of all things, and he developed the technique that cured rats of what were incurable cancer. And they could give rats, and they used to do all kinds of studies on it because when they give this rat this chemical, every single one of them dies. Well, he came up with this imaging approach, and you circulate images almost like the Tibetans. You know, they have their little thing that goes around and around, and every time it's a prayer. Well, he has this idea of images, and I'm using that, and I have some very good images, personal images, world images, things like that, and I just use them all the time, and I have faith in them. You know, I feel good about them. I talk about reincarnation because I believe there's a spiritual soul, which is the infinite soul, and everyone has one. I see the soul almost, excuse me, being like the atom in the old models where the smallest thing you could get that was meaningful was an atom. Well, I think individual spiritual souls are like that. Put them all together, past, present, and future. That's a pretty good definition of God. You know, all of them together and all of that information. And since we are one, I'm attached to it. I am God. You are God because we're attached to this infinite set of souls. And so reincarnation becomes natural. They're all entangled, and who knows what they want to do, but they're conscious. I believe they're conscious. They can do whatever they want. They do the remote viewing. They can attach to any other soul, and maybe there's a strong enough communication that this already existing soul wants to come back and maybe in another form, but it has information. So I have no problem with reincarnation. I'm just not personally interested in finding out about my own past lives.
Oh yeah, I mean, this is the thing that I repeatedly or repetitive when it comes to choices in this what we would define as conscious journey. You know, I've spent many decades helping people with all different types of level of paranormal awareness, intuitive states of being through the cultivational practices, teaching people. There's this part where actually maybe you should look this guy up because you're into PK and precognition. There's a guy by the name of John Chang, and he was the Magnus of Java. There was a book written about him, and he popped up in the 80s. And at that time, he was one of the very few people that there was evidence of him performing, all types of, telekinesis, psychokinesis, all these types of like paranormal things, and they videotaped it. Mm-hmm. And so, it was undeniable at the time. Now, how did I come across John Chang, which is a really interesting thing? I personally had quite, as a teacher, I also have clients and students and all types of different things. And so at the time, one of my clients was a very affluent and influential Indonesian business owner. He owned most of Indonesia, actually. His family was based out of Indonesia. He would live in America. I worked with his daughter as the family healer, right? So they don't believe in the good old fashioned, WebMD, the go down to the doctor with the white coat. No, I mean, dealing with Chinese culture, with Asian culture, it's very steeped in superstition, and the seed of it is all spiritual. So, I would work with this family, whatever the healings are, whether it's a sprained ankle, a broken back. One of his sons was actually on life support, and at the time, he flew me out to a hospital that he was in, and I maintained his vitals for 2 weeks until he was able to come out from Indonesia to America. The second he walked through the door and hugged his son, the vitals went. He went off. It was a flat line. And the doctors found it really perplexing because I was teaching the daughter how to move energy through his body, and he would have all these obscure like vitals where his blood pressure was up, he was dehydrated, and there were all these things that were going on. And the second I started showing her how to move the energy, because he was just laying there in a coma, I had a communication with him. I said, look, it's clear that this physical form is no longer containing this energy, and that you want to go. Your father has asked me to be here. Now, this is all woo-woo stuff we're talking about right now, Marty, in your world. And so I got in there, I communicated with him, and we maintained his vitals for 2 weeks. And the doctors were like, this is not even, this doesn't even make, this is so obscurely weird. I can't even explain it. This guy should be dead right now. And the father turned up. Now, this is a deeper mystical sort of like idea of reality. And unless you experience it, it just sounds like nonsensical. It doesn't sound real at all. It's obscurely weird.
Spiritual world of souls. It makes perfect sense.
Right. And so John Chang was also employed by this guy. And I got to communicate with him briefly before his passing. And he had a reputation for being able to emit heat from his hands and burn things, which was another form of, supernatural, paranormal abilities, right? Now, this guy would move objects, this typical telekinesis, but not like a piece of foil, but like you put a knife on the table and spin it around and until it just flew off the table. And so there were a lot of things that take place that are paranormal, and he and I had a conversation about certain things, but the truth of the matter is the father, this is the pinnacle part, because at the time I wasn't aware of John's presence, because he's got things going on all over the world, and I'm here in America treating his or helping his daughter and his family through all their stuff. I'm the guru. Within Chinese culture, they call me Guilo, which is a derogatory term for white spirit. But anyway, let's not go there. They go, how can a Guilo have more mastery than a traditional, a native Chinese? And I'm like, listen, I was Chinese in a past life. Put it that way. And so all I'm doing is bringing back what I already know from past lives. And they just like, well, that's undeniable. I mean, every time you do whatever, it's feng shui, any of the stuff that you need to do for me. And, moving in that field, I entertained a lot of people throughout this whole space for many, many, many decades.
Wait, excuse me 1 second. It's getting hot in here.
You should definitely check out John Chang. But to the bottom line was, I was having a conversation with Mr. Damati, which was the father. And he was like, you're just like John. And I'm like, really? Well, you instantly, I have a problem. I come to you, it's gone, it's healed, whatever it might be. These are, at one point I was doing silly things like just reading people's auric fields for their upper management for a business. So you have people coming into a business interview and they're like, what is this guy doing here? And the CEO's like, don't worry about it. Just answer a few questions. And then I would give them a yes or no answer, or ask them in more detail what I see in their field. So now we're getting right out there, Marty. But bottom line is, when you tap into the potential, and precognition is the basic fundamentals of what we speak of, you can get a very repeatable result. Now, the reason I brought up John Chang was we had this conversation, and it's in the book. If you read his book, Magnus of Java, you'll be like, whoa, okay. This is really quite something. Now, the father gave me this example. He goes, well, you do this thing where you heal the physical body. John would do things with objects. And I'm like, really? What is that? And he said, I was in his I was at home, and he was on one side of the kitchen, and he said, "Go and get a banana." And he held the banana in his hands, and he goes, "From the other side of the room, I'm going to take my sword fingers, which is a hand mudra that basically we use within Taoist magic, and I'm going to cut it in half." And the father's like, "You're out of your mind. This is not going to happen." So he walked to the other side of the room. He held this banana in his hand, and John was on the other side of the room, and he went like this, and he went, "Ha ha ha ha!" It didn't cut, and he goes, "Peel the banana," and he peeled the banana back, and it fell off.
The inside was cut.
Inside, and the father was like, "I couldn't believe it if I didn't see it with my own eyes." Now, there was a guy following John Chang around in the 80s who wrote the book Magnus of Java, who put that in the book, and I had never seen it before, and I was like, whoa.
Right.
Now we're getting into deeper, and there's like 6 degrees of separation, right? Now, for me, just like through your own admission, I'm not interested in past lives. That type of like telekinesis, psychokinesis stuff, it kind of excites me sometimes, but I'm not real. I'd rather just see a physical healing. I'm not into the bells and whistles. Now, I can envelop my forearm and drive a skewer through it and pull it out, and you won't see an entry or exit wound. That's just qigong. That's part of this energetic potential. And so the more and more you do these things, the more and more you go, okay, I ticked it off. It's my bucket list. Now I know it's possible, it happens. But the repeatable stuff that you gravitate to is the stuff that gets you excited. Now, when you said to me, I've noticed it's declining. I was at 65%. Now I'm going backwards. What do you think that is? You referred to it as the mind, like there's a blockage, there's something going on. Would you still agree with that?
Yes. And I think part of it is boredom, too.
Right.
I've been doing it for so many years. And more recently, it's actually going up again because I modified the techniques a little bit. But you see, I know, again, wanting to get the 80% hurt the 65%, I think, because I was working to come up with this thing that you have. Does it have a name when you get to that place where all the energies have come together and you're ready to go out wherever you intend it? Does that thing?
That's what we call Wu Wei.
W-U Wei. Okay.
Yeah.
W-E-I.
Wu Wei. That's called effortless action, effortless effort.
Okay.
Bruce Lee brought it to everyone's forefront. They call it the flow.
Okay.
You are there. You have the energetic potential to do anything at that present moment.
Exactly. And everything I talk a lot about, all there is the now, but getting that woo-wee into the now. Now tell me more about how you do that. How do you train people to do it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it's a method. So you have to be able to stack these things up just like Legos.
Okay.
So you're coming to a certain point. It's not just like this, I get a lot of people that come to me, they're like, I feel energy, I see the Palladians, I'm channeling this, I'm doing that. And I'm like, okay, well, is it repeatable? I want you to give me an example of what you've witnessed and validated in your reality that would be able to repeat what it is that you're experiencing. And most people are like, well, I just help facilitate people, and I'm just this conduit, because they don't want to be subject to this realization that they're not embodying it at 100% potential. So by bringing that resonance in,
building blocks.
Pardon me?
The idea of building blocks. So you really have a very specific procedure. It's almost like it's written. And of course, people have to do it. I'm sure meditation is part of it.
Well, it becomes this substance, and this palpable substance that is second to none. And you will be able to generate and resonate at that state. It's just like everything. Have you ever exercised before, like lift weights or anything of that nature?
Yeah, I used to play a lot of tennis, and I still do the treadmill and things like
Right,
that.
right.
Yeah,
Now, what do you notice about that? What you notice is your physical potential is limited by your time and attention.
right.
So it means that you can do this for an extended period of time, get a result, but if you do not maintain it, it's gone. It disappears. The endurance, the aerobic endurance, the muscle endurance, it starts to diminish if you're not putting more time and attention to it. Would you agree?
Yes, and so that's one of the things which is part of this. Is this one of your classes? You teach people to do this?
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. I teach people how to get right to the center point
On,
and
on
repeat the abilities that we are speaking of. This is not just a figment of your imagination. It has to be documented by you as real. And you know what happens is I get a lot of people, they start this stuff and they're like, this is just, I feel amazing because I'm getting this state. And what happens is I've measured so many brain waves over the years. I mean, I'm probably in the thousands. You stay in a state that is undeniable. You know when you're in that center point. You don't have to see visual things. You have a feeling of when your Death Star moment is because you've cultivated it and it's repeatable, and you use the simplicity of your neurology to set that up. But it's a cultivational practice. So a
so
lot of people
you
have
did
that.
the-
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, but this is so fascinating.
Hmm.
When you did the roulette
Hmm.
example, where you got maybe almost all of them, if not all of them in a row, you were in that state and able to
Yes.
maintain that state.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm having a dialogue with another access of information, right? Now, for a lot of people, the development of that can start in the third eye, right? And so you want to start with something where you're creating the imagery. Now, you get clear sense, clear audio, all these other fundamentals that come with you balancing and regulating the energy. So when I do, like, for example, what I call black ops psychic readings, drive-by psychic readings, people get a little, because we live in Vegas. I've trained a lot of I have 6 kids. I have at least 3 of them are fundamentally developing these skills like remote viewing and distance healing and all that kind of good stuff. But you start with the fundamentals, right? What are the fundamentals? Well, understanding there is a veil between conscious and unconscious process. Now, what do you do to pierce that veil so that you have 100% access? So, from a psychologist perspective, you're dealing with this timeline that you spoke of, the trauma, all these things that are a human condition. So they start with all this stuff as a child, and you sort of go, oh, I'm starting to understand consciousness a little bit more, and it has to do with this unconscious process, this probability that I'm not accessing the information that I potentially could because I've been limited. And so, we call this, or a therapist would call this, a critical faculty, the firewall of your mind. How do
Mhm.
you jump over that? How do you access mentalism? Everything is mind, not just this small compartmentalized version that is sort of like a watered down sort of things flashing back and forth in my mind, potential, but it's never validated. Now that's where you get into the energetic practices that make it real to you, not just a figment of your imagination. So understanding how to cultivate those practices is the very starting of this incredible journey. And when you start repeating it, because you can feel it, and of course the side effects are you see all these things. Now, when I talk about the psychic readings, the fastest way for someone to sober up and go, holy shit, this is real, is by me never meeting you before, walking up to you, and I'm looking. I can, well, how I view the world, because of the way that I've cultivated the energies, the practices I teach people, it's literally like turning on a light bulb, and everything looks like a computer screen with 1,000 icons. You can focus your intention on anything, and it will give you the auric field, the energetic potential, the trauma timeline, the excess and deficiency of emotional content, which basically determines whether you have a regulated energetic potential. And so from a Chinese model, from a Taoist alchemy model, every energy center, which we call the Dantian, has an emotion and a virtue. And the goal of the seeker is to balance the emotion and virtue. So if you have an excess emotion, you diminish the emotion and you reveal the virtue, which makes you harmonious with the rest of the system. And so when you go and when I do a psychic reading on someone, it's just a drive-by, walk up to them. We're down on the strip. Everyone's having a good time, it's potential. And my kids love playing Magic Day like that. So we'll go out and we'll entertain ourselves. People want to party. And I'll be like, would you like a psychic reading? And they're like, sure, give me a psychic reading. And I always start with the bottom. And why do I do that? Now, within Taoism, we have, 108 energy centers between the earth and the universe that you can cultivate that potential. Normally, once someone gets to 27, you're pretty much flying high. You're like Superman. Your potential is unlimited. But let's just start with the first 9. Now, from a Hindu perspective, you would call them chakras. We call them dantians. Dantian means energy field. And we create and develop the Nidan, which is the internal alchemy, the internal energy, which is what is the potential of the Taoist seeker. Now you regulate these energy centers, and it will come out in your mental, emotional, physical state. And once you regulate those, all bets are off because you have this wu-wei moment. So when I look at someone and I look at their potential, it gives me the information of their energy centers. And so all of a sudden, you start at the bottom because Earth would be considered a transpersonal point. We call it energy center 1, Dantian 1. Then you go to 2, 3, 4, and up the scale till you connect with what we consider the universe. Now, by the time I get to the second energy center, which is what you consider the root chakra, what happens is people start to get a little concerned because I start talking about the fundamental moral compass that someone has, whether they step over someone's boundaries or not, depending upon their own position within their own human experience. By the time I get to the sexual energy, which is energy number 3 for us in chakra number 2, all of a sudden they go, whoa, 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 whoa. You don't need any more. I don't need to hear any more. And they look at me and go, this shit is real. I'm like, 100%. I'm reading off a menu. I'm not here looking for your approval to tell me that I'm the next coming of Jesus Christ or I'm some Holy Spirit channeler. I'm just reading the information which I was trained in. So it becomes I'm not invested in the outcome. And that's where people get really, holy moly. You're just reading the information that you can see from your own cultivational practices. And that's where people get really sobered up, because this is a validation of what we speak of when we're talking about the potential, precognitive potential that is instantaneous, right? Because it actually goes beyond that. You're just reading information and you're able to give someone their mental, emotional state and they don't know you. And they go, that doesn't even make sense to me. How do you do that? And it's a training. That's what it is.
When did you start this training?
I've been doing it for decades. Almost since
like 18, 19, you got out in the real world and then you got into this world.
Almost instantaneously. The second I was exposed to what they call meditation when I was, verging on entering from the teens to the 20s, right. I was instantly shown the potential. So I don't know whether you heard any of my stories, but I went to a meditation class because there was a voice in my head that we don't speak of. All humans go, I've got 5 senses, right? And then when you sit there and you go, guess what? 5 senses, you really have 8 right now. You can speak something, see something, hear something in your mind. There's 3 more right there. Booyah. Let's get down with the races. How is that possible? You're doing it all the time, only no one's ever brought your attention to it to go, you're already beyond the limitations of what you perceive as reality. and you're doing it just in a quiet way to yourself, and
But
you
then
just
you got into training with Taoists. There was
yes,
a group, so you got meditation, you got interested, and then you got into a Taoist group. So you
yes.
must have been 10 years old or something
I
like
got
that.
into following that. Well, the big thing was within the first week, I went to a meditation class. I was exposed to. I'd never done meditation before. I was into physical, brute force, bodybuilding, powerlifting. So when I sat down, I had this Hollywood version that you must be in the lotus position. I was a 300-pound gorilla with just muscle everywhere. I couldn't even sit up straight. My back was hurting when I was attempting to contort into the lotus position,
It's so
right?
funny imagining you that way.
Right. It's really strange stuff. So when I did that, I was like, I can't even think. So I went to this freebie, and back in those days we had rotary phones, Hare Krishnas. There was a movement that was coming out of the 60s and 70s into the 80s, realizing that there's something greater out there. Spirituality, Hindu, Buddhism. There was something going on around the world, but we weren't that familiar with it. Beatles were talking about some type of phenomenon in the mind through their music and LSD and all this kind of, out of Woodstock and Free Love Dove Baby and all that kind of stuff. But really, today, the way the society is formed, you don't have the information or understanding of that. Like you as a normal person operating in your life, you would look at Hare Krishna sort of behavior and think it was a cult and sort of step away from it. Now you go, well, look, I have a belief system just like I would going to church or to a temple. I would believe in something greater and I would cultivate that relationship. Now, when I got into the meditation thing, I was looking for a freebie. There was something in my mind saying, get into this thing. And I had this idea it had to be stillness. I didn't know. It was just like you become quiet. I'm like, I don't know what quiet is. I just know I can pick things up and crush things. So when I got into that, it was a freebie from some grandmaster who basically was going, I'm going to teach you how to meditate. And so it was in a rec center in the middle of a ghetto. I was fearing for my life. I pulled up there going, I'm probably going to get killed between here and the building itself in the parking spot. There is dogs barking, people screaming. It was just noise around the whole outside. Once you got inside, it didn't really muffle it that much. You could hear all this nonsense, cars speeding past, all this kind of craziness. So I'm sitting there in the room, looking around the room going, I'm in a room full of half a dozen misfits that are beggars like me looking for a freebie. And I've got this little 50-pound, grandmaster straight out off the boat from China going, I'm going to teach you how to meditate. And in my mind, I'm thinking, this person's trying to get some write-off for some, nonprofit. They're doing something, right? What is there's a mindset, the skepticism. And so I sit there and I'm getting distracted by the noise. And people are settling in and trying to get in their lotus position. And I'm thinking, there's no way this is going to work. I'm just like, it's just not. It's like, no. When I get into the zone for a lift, when I'm like pulling crazy weight, like squatting 800 pounds, deadlifting 800, there's a zone. Little did I know that zone was Wu Wei, right? So I'm doing this Wu Wei for years, right? I'm in the Wu Wei. And all of a sudden, I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, I'm all hunched over. This woman's like, now all I want you to do is listen to my voice. And I'm thinking, yeah, right. Okay, lady. In my mind, I'm like, I'm listening to your voice. I got noise in the background, all this stuff. My back's aching. I'm looking around the room. I look like one of the other misfit beggars. We're looking for something for free. And she goes, listen to my voice, and then everything will fall away. And the second she said that, Marty, this is what happened. And I just went off the chart. It just disappeared. The sound disappeared. It didn't exist. There was nothing. It was just nothing. There was no sound. There was nothing. I was just like, I was open, eyes open, with no ability to access sound. And I'm just like, holy crap. and I instantly closed my eyes, and this glow of feeling came over my body. I stayed with it, and then slowly, probably over 15 or 20 minutes, her voice started to come back in. And I was like, this is profound. This is beyond profound. This is I don't know what this is, but I want more of it. I got to have it. I need this stuff. And this is the excitement that you and I get when we're on this journey to find this stuff that we know is true, but it's like, just mostly conceptual, and people are talking about it, but you need to validate it for yourself. So from there, I went to, let me find this next thing is like, okay, well, what else is available? What can I channeling, right? So within a space of several days, I went to a channeling class by this guy that had done this for 60 years. And I literally walked in there in the first attempt and channeled Lao Tzu, which was like this. It was like when you channel, and you may want to become familiar with it or not, and I'll be more than happy to give you some tips. But when you channel, it's as if you're in an episode of Star Trek, and there's a laser beam of energy that comes down from above and saturates the whole physical body, and you start to oscillate, and basically there's an emission of heat and energy that is not of this world. And so everyone in that class at that time got out their sticks with their marshmallows and started cooking them from the transmission that was coming from my body. And I was instantly, Lao Tzu came in, and I heard audio of his voice, and I could see him as clear as you. And he's like telling me, welcome home. This is great. And I'm just like, my teacher almost had a stroke. He's like, I've been doing this 60 years. 60 years. Like he was beside himself with anger. And you, some bodybuilder, whatever, walk in here and literally hit the mother lode, and you're all of a sudden some profound like channeler. It got him to a point, honestly, Marty, where in the end he passed away 6 months later.
Oh, geez.
And that was a much deeper thing that we got into. Different practices where I was doing readings on people, and I was being taught the psychic stuff, and it revealed the whole plot that he had developing all these other skills. And so and he was like, I don't want you to tell you. And I'm like going, well, this entity is telling me that if you don't stop what you're doing, you are going to lose your life. And I was just speaking from the information coming through. It's like, I can't stop. And sure enough, within weeks, he was diagnosed with brain cancer. And within 6 months, he was dead.
Wow. So getting Lao Tzu, did he direct you to a way gathering?
Yeah. I mean, basically.
And we went to a way gathering.
Yeah. Basically, I mean, he set me on my path to pursue Taoist lineage. But I was already accessing. The week after that, Marty, I witnessed a physical healing where gangrenous flesh went back to pink in color within 40 minutes. This all happened within a span of several weeks. And
what's interesting about this, when I was growing up, and I told you I was reading science fiction, and I was reading some of the spiritual stuff as well, and I called these in my mind miracle stories. Could you believe it or could you not believe it?
Right.
After getting in, and it's interesting. For me, everybody's different. For me, it took precognition, and then Jeff Mishloff and other people and you, I now believe all this stuff, and that's not the issue. The issue is what's now for me.
And now it's time for you to get I always tell people, unless you're an alien, which I've never really dealt with personally. I've communicated with aliens. I've seen aliens in auric fields. I've seen them very clearly, but I haven't used any of these energetic practices on aliens, so I can't guarantee they work on aliens. But on human beings, if you identify as a human form, these practices have been around for thousands of years, and they work very well on the seeker. it's like repeatable. Now, Tom and I had this conversation, which I found interesting because we went over, I get a lot of people that will just call me randomly and go, look, I heard you're that guy. Grandma's in a coma. They're telling me she's going to die. And then I just tap in and the potential is no. I say, no, don't worry about it. We're good. And then she wakes up the next day out of a coma and the doctors are like, what in Tao's name is going on here? Now, I had this conversation with Tom and he's familiar with it because he's experienced that many times himself. Because what happens is I'm not getting subject to the outcome of someone validating this. I don't need any I already know.
Right.
I know it's been done. I've experienced it thousands of times that there's not a question. It's not something where I need someone to give me approval of what they're experiencing. And I fundamentally believe from a seeker's perspective, it's critical to accept things at face value, which is from a humanistic perspective almost impossible because you're in the intellect. It's like, hang on a second, you're asking me to do what? I mean, that's and you won't realize it until you have that wu-wei moment, the wu-ji moment, the center point moment, and that's the energetic potential. That's why you must build on the processes so you can go, I'm there right now. Yep. Okay, I'm there. I have the tangibility of it. I know that I have the ability now to change the probability.
Now that you've also used the word zone, that's the word that resonates the best with me.
Yeah.
Because when I used to play tennis, and I got reasonably good, there were times when I'd be in the zone. And I wasn't doing anything. It was just all very natural. And so I think I know the place you're talking about. And I'm going to figure out how to get there. And I guess I can go to your website and find one of your classes.
Yes. I'm just finishing up a refresh on all the offerings of things that I can that I'm giving to people. But a lot of you normally if you invest a what natural born life short period of time, but within 6 to 12 months you're going to have a very mastered sort of like repeatable experience that you get into these cultivational practices. So it's not like I need 20 years of your life, or oh no, if you don't do this, if you eat red meat and you don't abstain from sex and you're thinking that you're a vegan, you're a meat eater, you're a Taoist, you're Catholic, you're none of that. We're talking about energetic potential. Does this make sense?
It does, and it works for almost everybody if they stay with the program.
Not almost everybody. It will work for everybody. I mean, you understand, like, one of the biggest things that I can see within your field is you haven't even tapped into your energetic potential. Your sensitivity is not even close to where it could be. Not even close. And that has to do with cultivating that particular channel within the physical body so that you are far more present to the potential of all the energy that is already there.
Yeah, no, in reading your Tao Te Ching, I can just see you're coming at things from a very different direction, and that was important for me to recognize. So, yes, I'm quite intellectual, but I've got my emotions, and obviously I've been working on my spiritual side. But you do this differently, mentioning words like virtue. That's interesting, and nothingness. So I'm looking forward to continuing this journey. How much time a day do you usually devote? People on this journey, what would they devote?
Well, that's the whole point about how you level up from the physical to the, to basically going into the intuitive. Mm-hmm. You are now this present moment. That's why I wanted to reference the physical journey that you've been on, because once you take your attention off it, it diminishes the return. This does not. Once you start accessing consciousness and the energetic potential, it continues to gather on itself. It's what we call within Taoism absorbing the riches. So you accumulating. So, normally when I go to bed, I'll go to bed and I'll wake up and I feel like a plutonium dump site of energy has accumulated within my physical flesh to a point where I feel like Mr. Stay Puft, because there's so much density of energy. And that's part of mastering those cells, mastering the energetic potential, and being able to accumulate it. Because a lot of people people come to me, light workers, psychologists, physicists, energy people, Reiki masters, Qigong people, Chinese medicine doctors, whatever, medical doctors. The one thing that is a red flag of anyone's journey, I always ask them, how do you feel at the end of the day? Before anything else, well, how is that relevant? Just explain to me how you feel. And the first thing that comes out of their mouth is, I'm exhausted. And you see, you're first and foremost, that is one of the fundamentals to your own journey, is realizing that this physicality, your constitution from a Taoist perspective, never has to be tapped into. You want to have a very robust energetic profile, but you don't want to use it with your attention intention, which is what everyone does. If you're a janitor, your attention intention, your life force is being poured into cleaning floors in McDonald's. By the end of the day, you're going to be exhausted because you're tapping into your energetic potential from this physical body. This is not how a Taoist works. So when you come into this world, you have this thing called Jing. It's called the Constitution. I refer to it as a battery pack. No one ever comes in at 100% because your hereditary genetic disposition of whatever your ancestors have given you will give you variables, right? So what happens is your energy pack is probably about 80% normally, right? The exciting part about Taoist alchemy is you can take your battery from 80% to 100%, then from 100% to 1,000%, from 1,000% to 9,000%, where you're saturating the cell. And Tom and I went over this also, where the longest podcast I ever had, Marty, was 7.5 hours. And I felt more energized by the end of that podcast than ever before. When Tom and I have conversations, normally 2 to 3 plus 4 hours, and he's sitting there and he's a he's a spring chicken. He's 80 years young, and he's sitting there and he's having this conversation with me. We don't pause for water. We don't pause for coffee breaks. We don't pause for bathroom breaks. We are present, and he doesn't miss a beat. Now that is tapping into the mother. So there's a very fundamental difference between the energetic potential of the physical, which is what a Taoist does to immortalize this physical flesh so that you can have as much time within this incarnation to gather consciousness to its full potential for your journey, for your experience. And so by doing that, you saturate the cell. And when you saturate the cell, all of a sudden, you're not tapping into, you're the maestro of the 50 trillion cells you have, accessing the energetic potential of a 0.07 millivolts of electrical potential, energy. When you do that, that's a whole nother ballgame. And then you realize you can tap into the mother, which is abundant, timeless, endless, limitless, infinite, and you never, ever source this energy. So you're always robust, always energetic, always aware and expansive within your journey. And that comes from the cultivational practices. And a lot of people, they get caught up in, I'm a Reiki master, I'm a Qigong master, I'm a functional medicine doctor, I'm a medical doctor. When you identify as that one thing, you will be spent by the end of your day. The fastest way to give you a calibration of where you're at is, how do you feel? Does this make sense?
It does. And I'm pretty good that way. This is so fascinating. Do you dream when you...
Yeah. I tend to, within Nigong, which is inner power, we develop a Nidan, which is internal alchemy, right? And so that internal alchemy is where you have the ability to access all dimensions at once. So this is where, it's like the old the expression "shit or get off the pot." I hate to use adjectives, but there you go. You will be realized, and so most people's out of body experience comes in the form of an NDE, near death. I had this weird thing where I spoke to God, and they don't really revisit that because they don't understand how to get back there without attempting to try and kill themselves, or having sleep paralysis where they feel like the magnetic potential is limited, and you're now off out of the physical body. And there's all these Hollywood versions of how people remove themselves from the physical flesh, and a lot of it is in their literally in their psyche, not in the potential of consciousness, and that's why it's never realized. Now, when you're able to start cultivating Nigong the way I'm speaking of, you can operate in all dimensions at the same time. And it will be self-evident by the experiences that you have. So some of the simplicity of things like that is, imagine you have a dog barking in the background. The simplicity of that is, can you change the probability of that dog barking within seconds using your attention intention? These are part of this, some of the exercises that you get involved with as you start cultivating the substance. And you will realize that you can do that not just 65% of the time, not 85% of the time, but 100% of the time.
It's amazing.
Cultivational practices.
It's just amazing. Well, I'm, for whatever reason, had a somewhat different thought, and I don't know if you're going to want to do this in some form. I haven't thought of it well, but you've probably heard of Skip Atwater.
I have, for some reason. Who?
He was the head of the remote viewing program at Fort Meade.
Right.
I did trainings with him at the Monroe Institute. So after I took classes and a few things anyway, he wrote a book called 8200, which I just got, which takes information from Pat Price. You've heard of him?
No.
Okay. Okay, good. You're getting into new stuff. Pat Price was probably the best remote viewer ever. I don't know if Joe McMonagle would think so, but from everything I've heard, he was super, super good. And they used him. He was the fellow who, when they gave him a target, which was like a getaway home in the forest, he missed it, but he went to a place just a few miles away that was super, super secret. And he actually read, which was considered impossible, files and closed safes. The CIA, we call them the Men in Black, we never quite know who they were, came out to his place. He was sure there was a leak of some sort. That's how good he was. And he was one of the people that kept remote viewing going for many years. Now, so he did a lot of standard stuff. Also on his own, and he gave this to Hal Puthoff, who shared it with Skip, a transcript of 4 ET sites here on Earth. Okay. And I'm just starting to read those transcripts now. But that isn't really where I wanted to go. What came into me was Mars and Martians. Mars, and Pat Price mentioned Mars as possibly being the source of these people. But Mars looks barren now. But I've done webinars with a guy he calls it Blue Planet Red. And he's talking about all the life that's on Mars now, but it's microtubule. But we did, and I did one of the sessions on Mars, and there's a possibility that there's still life underground. Could you look at that?
There's nothing you can't look at. There's nothing you can't tap into.
Would you?
Would I? Yeah,
No.
but absolutely. I mean, I have no problems tapping into different sources of information.
Well, let's Okay, let's do that. Tap into Mars now, underground life. Be the tasking. Is there some there? There is, of course, you'd want to describe it. But if not, I'm going to ask you to go back millions of years because there's clearly life. Mars is the place where there's a pyramidal shape. There's a face. Oh, you'd be fascinated by reading this stuff. Um, um, this is photographs from NASA, and it looks like a pyramid. In fact, the area has a name. They call it a city because there's other stuff there. Now it's been blown over, by dust storms and probably millions of years. But wouldn't it be fascinating to know if there's still life there now underground?
Well, there's a mirroring effect even within the pyramids here on planet Earth that is below. And all that stuff is in solid gold. I came across that a while ago and had a conversation with another channeler. And you literally have a mirroring city that is 100% solid, made out of gold, underground the pyramids that are present right now.
Real gold.
Yeah, real gold.
And how come nobody has talked about that? I mean,
I have no idea. Again, this is the funny part, Marty. It's like I will get information, and I'm not a all warm and fuzzy about it. It's like it just is. You just read it off, and it's like, okay, that's interesting. Like just 6 months ago, I had Dolores Cannon come to me and go over her conversation. I don't know whether you even know who she is, and I went over. She was a hypnotherapist who used hypnosis, deep levels of somnambulistic sort of states of a trance to decipher information where all her groups of clients would be used as catalysts to transmute this, what she called super consciousness, through their physical body. And she spent years logging this information because she was getting all this information directly from her clients and writing it down. And so she came to me. This is part of like channeling 101. When you open the doors and leave the lights on, information comes through and entities and spirits come through. And so she went on for weeks at a time bothering me. And at a certain point, I was like, look, I'm not here to dispute or validate whatever you're experiencing. And she's like, listen, people are not using my system the way they should be. Anyway, I had like 3 or 4 of her practitioners on explaining this because I got the skeptic within me is like, how do I know this is really her? Right? I'm going, you know what? I don't know. So I look into it and then I start hearing, if she ever came back, she would never come back channeling through someone. And I was like, okay, look, this energy looks like her, sounds like her, is repeating this whole thing about the people that are practicing her method are not doing it correctly. That's why people are not getting as deep into a trance. There's 5 stages to a method. They're only doing 3. This is what she was complaining about. And she was telling me that you need to tell people it's because of the people running my business right now. Now, that got even deeper. I didn't even want to go there. But what happened was once I interviewed 3 or 4 of her practitioners that had worked closely with her, they're like, that's exactly her. And yes, we are not getting people as deep into a trance because they don't have to. It's a level of consciousness. Now, I'm telling you, she's saying you're not practicing her methods appropriately, and that's why they're not going as deep. And they were like, holy shit, this is really her talking. I'm like, I don't know. I'm just explaining to you the information that she's sharing with me. Now, a few months before that, I had an interesting visit from Bruce Lee. And so Bruce Lee comes in, and all jokes aside, Marty, the funniest thing, on his 50th anniversary of his death, little did I know, I didn't know that, and he starts going on about the curse that he had through his family and all this other stuff. So I documented and I put it on YouTube. You can watch it if you want. It's a 2-part series. And it goes over all the information that he shared with me. And people are just like, I couldn't believe it. I had this inspired reason to want to watch all his movies and all these things because he's putting his tentacles out to the receptors of anyone that wants to listen to this information. And so you have these validating moments where when I speak to you, you may know nothing about what I'm saying, but you viscerally are going, this feels right. There's something going on within me that is giving me a validation of this expansion that goes, guess what? I don't need to know this. I feel it. And that's part of that intuitive journey that you go on, is getting that information. So when I look at the pyramids and this whole other world underneath it, I've mentioned 2 or 3 people, and people are like, well, that makes complete sense. Well, okay. It's just another fleeting source of information. It doesn't excite me for a validation. Now, when I get a Dolores thing or a Bruce Lee, you go, wow, you can't make this stuff up. It's like, it's impossible to make it up. And so you get these other levels of development.
This is all so fascinating. There's been a lot of remote viewing also on Mars. Joe McMonagle did some, and first got to the pyramid. Hal Puthoff asked him, and what he found was a desolate place that had been destroyed. And Hal asked him to go back 1,000,000 years, and he found the Martians were still there 1,000,000 years ago, and they were tallish, skinny-ish people, humanoid, sort of like. But you see, you can't validate any of that, but it's just what he got. But it's so interesting. No.
Oh, we can go down. We can go down that path. Here's the thing: you start to validate it. For me, you look at the energetic potential. The fastest way to get someone's attention when I interact with them is do a reading on their aura, and share with them what I see in their field, and then all of a sudden they go, "Oh my goodness, I had this intimate relationship with Jesus and Buddha, but no one knew that, and you just told me you saw it in my field. That's blowing my mind right now." Because all I'm doing is observing. I'm not
Right.
going, let me call in the energies to get. No, it's that state that you have to cultivate. That wu wei moment has to be repeatable because of the development of your energetic potential. And that's why I keep telling people, you must cultivate your energetic potential. You will not bear the fruit that you're looking for without these fundamental building blocks, and it will always just be fleeting. It won't be repeatable, and that's so critical to the journey, is getting that mastery down. And when you do it, and going back to that question you made, well, how many hours a day do you have to? What I was getting at was, physically, you have to put time and attention to create a result that is diminished from time and attention. So all of a sudden you have this, I exercised and I got in shape, I lost 3 pounds. But if I start eating chocolate donuts again, I'm going to put 3 pounds back on, and I'm not exercising anymore. I'm not burning the extra calories. When you get into this wu wei, the wu ji, it becomes instantaneous. That means you can start tapping into it at will. The more time and attention you put into it within the cultivational practices makes it accessible instantaneously. And I can tell you from a neurological perspective, the phenomenon of mirror neurons, that I don't limit anything for anybody. I experienced it almost instantaneously decades ago, and I've done nothing but build on it. But to say that someone else can't be exposed to what I share with them and they can instantly adopt it is absolutely 100% possible. I've seen it so many times, it's not funny. And you cultivate, you sink your teeth into it, and it becomes something that doesn't leave you. I think initially, as you start to cultivate the substance, it's a fear, like you mentioned, the emotional content, the fear of losing it. You're like, I finally got there. I'm going to lose this thing. I can't lose it. It's like, oh, I've got the 6-pack. I can't lose the 6-pack. I've got to continue. It's about how much you are able to activate.
Interesting.
It's the energetic potential is the activation is critical. You cannot, once you turn it on, it doesn't go off. That's something that we need to be very clear on. It's not like, some people call it Kundalini awakening. Now, even a Kundalini experience I've only ever come across 3 people in my lifetime that are Kundalini masters. I don't dismiss anyone saying they've had a Kundalini experience. It's more an energetic awakening per se. Now, within Taoism, we activate what we call the Wu Ji body, the infinite Wu Ji body. That means that all lights are on. You've left the lights on. Now everything, all potential is now becoming realized, and you cultivate. So the chi packing is the validation, because you start getting into that Wu way, and you're able to create density, the substance, and it's part of your own practice that doesn't leave you. Once you turn it on, it never ever diminishes. It only gets stronger. And what I've had from many students over decades is, just when I think the energy couldn't get any stronger, it gets even stronger. That's what happens. That's the
I'm looking forward to this as a new journey for me. I will take this on.
Yeah.
And, so
because I think what's exciting for me with you is being taught these type of methods and then introducing them into your physics community,
right.
and being able to validate stuff that has been in such question for so long, because it's just not. It's just like, but I also don't get all, people don't go, well, why don't you show me this now? I'm like, I'll show you when I want to show you it.
Right.
Whereas a lot of physicists and scientists are like, I need to see this right now. Well, that's kind of like part of the problem with the relationship. If we built a relationship up and said, now let's go through this path and I'll show you it. At will, I'll show Joe Blow. I'll go into Safeway and someone I'll know who's a grocery packer has a back problem and a back brace on. And that same second, I will relieve and eliminate his back pain because I want to.
Mm-hmm. Right.
You know what I mean? It's like it's a place of servitude. This selflessness is part of it.
Yes.
That
makes so much sense. You know, it makes so much sense to get to this place where you get this energetic feeling. You can't do it in a selfish way. That'd be so counterproductive.
This is where I get a lot of students that are like, Jifu, I want to learn. I want to embody the energy. I want to heal people. I want to do all this magical stuff. And I'm like, this is exciting. This is what inspires people to start on the Taoist path. I do not diminish it by any stretch of the imagination. I don't go, listen, the instant moral compass is you must do this. No, I'm not. This is not what this is about, because quite frankly, the universe doesn't have a moral compass. But let's get down to what happens as a human realizing the potential. Now, that's when all bets are off. Within Taoism, we call it, let the man who's never left the village, let him know he's seen the world, because it's inside you.
Correct.
And so this is all sort of like a philosophy sort of based stuff, and it's sort of like, oh, that's so sweet. That sounds good. That's a novice sort of concept. How great is that? No, embodying it and knowing it to be true is the energetic potential. I'm
sorry, go ahead.
No, but the selflessness comes from, I go, you will embody this selfless servitude. And a lot of my students initially go, but no, I do. I want to do that, but I need to cultivate the energy first. And I need to make it about myself. And I'm like, when you're in service to others, you're in service to yourself. And people, and they go, whoa, sign me up. I'm there now. Because part of it, I'll give you an incantation that the Jade Emperor uses, right? So this is an incantation.
Okay.
A power abundant in its giving you will receive. Unifying the body with the spirit with the energy. Bringing heaven to earth. Transcending all is one, one is all. Revealing perfection manifest. That is your gift. That is your offering. That is your gift. That is your offering. That is your gift. That is your offering. And
I might have read that in one of the verses.
Right, right. And this is the part of the relationship that you have the mirroring effect. And so people understand the laws of attraction, like attracts like, the idea of, oh, well, yeah, that kind of makes sense. But what happens is when you become truly selfless, which takes no effort, everyone's experienced it once in their lifetime where they are selfless, where they just do, they don't think. It's always remind people, if you're thinking, you're not knowing. If you're knowing, you're feeling. And so they just immediately, they're in service. The servitude is there. They're not going, well, what do I get out of this if I help this person across the street, or I give someone $5, or maybe I help my neighbor with a project outside, or maybe I'm giving more emotional support to one of my loved ones or a friend. There's this diabolical humanistic need for return. Whereas if you are selfless and you're in that woo way, that effortless action, you immediately mirror that, and it becomes your gift is your offering. Your gift is your offering. And that's that power that comes with it. And all of a sudden, the supernatural is natural, and all these things that are being cultivated by our imaginations become realized, and you have the ability because you're able to repeat it. Does that make sense?
It not only makes sense, I'm also getting that when I start this way and it starts growing, who knows where it's going to lead? The things that I have that seem important to me now may not be after this power, and it is a kind of selfless power,
Yeah.
manifests itself. So I'm looking forward to that.
Well, that's it. That's part of the internal alchemy. It's like you have this dormant ability that people don't realize. And so they stay in their mind, they get a little taste of the spiritual dragon, and they don't access that robust potential, which is abundant, timeless, endless, limitless, infinite. And that's the mother. And so then they stay within their physical body. So you get a lot of healers that are like massage therapists or light workers or Reiki masters or Qigong masters, whatever. They're always broken. They're like, oh, I've healed. I had a clinic and I've healed 32 people this week, and I've got this ailment and that ailment. But it also starts with fear. If you are me, I am you. What am I afraid of?
Right.
So that seed of realization is you can't walk into anything with any sense of fear, because then you become subject to the dualistic boundaries of this reality. And that comes with good, bad, up and down, in and out. Yin and yang is not that. Yin and yang is just yin and yang. And that's where people get fundamentally caught up in the mistake of that. It's a byproduct of this, but to access the sweet spot is between the yin and yang, the breath in and the breath out is the center point, the Wu Ji. And so instantly you access the mother. And that's where people get all, holy moly, it's been right in front of me the whole time. 100%. You have access, you have the keys to the city. All I'm doing with these practices is helping you remember who that is. Remember who you are. Remember that feeling and repeat it.
Yes. Yes. And, and not taking away anything from what you said. This has been said many other times, by many other people, many other ways. But doing it, that's the step that almost all of us miss.
I get a lot of people talking about the Taoist alchemy, because this is something that has been fragmented for many decades. You've seen shades of it over the last 40 years in and out of the Western world, but it's broken methods. The methods have to be a robust development that continually fortifies itself.
Whoa.
You're having an earthquake.
Yeah. Did you see me shake?
Yeah.
I was almost going to get up and go under the door. No, it's over. But the bookcase, nothing fell off. We had an earthquake.
There you go. What a coincidence.
12:20. I hope you didn't do that.
Well, it's funny how these energies work, Marty. It's crazy. Once you get that resonance, it's undeniable, my friend.
Well, I am, believing it. I've believed this stuff for a long time. What I'm now committed to, and I thank you for that. Right? You're supposedly interviewing me, but we've really had a conversation here, which has motivated me to do this. I'll have to see what it takes for me to get into that sweet spot, that moo.
I'll be more than happy to give you guidance, give you practice, give you the tools that are necessary for you to create the evidence, because it doesn't, I've over decades I've had people that are like, I don't feel energy, I don't know any of this stuff, I don't believe in it, I don't do it. And the second you show them the potential, because some of the things that you would be nursing WebMD for of a physical transmuted states of energetic potential that do not have to do with diabetes, heart attacks, strokes, but there are physical traits that transmute to exhibit these types of symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll take your mind there, but they are not at any stretch of the imagination. When you start filling this center point up with the energetic potential, it will feel so heavy that at a certain point, your respiration will be labored. You'll be like, "There's so much blood in my heart. How is that possible that you could condense all that energy into one spot? Yet my mind is open to all things. I feel so expansive. Yet I'm feeling this resonance and this vibration in my heart that would exhibit something that potentially would be a cardiac event. It's not. But once you develop the skill of the energy, you will start to identify, I accumulated that. I brought that concentration to that point, and you're like, holy moly. I've got charge of energy in my hands that are the size of mitts, and it's all been channeled from this particular center point. And then I'm moving it up and down the channels from the lower dantian to the middle dantian to the upper dantian. And I'm cultivating it, and it's palpable. This is the exciting part about the potential that people don't get because it's not really shown or shared or taught, and it happens all over the place. I mean, Kundalini awakenings, a lot of people get into the business of, I'm here to transmit your awakening. Well, that's great, but you're not the master keeper creator of my reality. I am. Right. So all I do is give you the tools to do it, but that precognition is the thing that people get excited about, right? So what does that mean? So when I teach people things, you have to be able to explain it in your own words. I know the outcome. All the infrastructure is already there. What's happening when you get these methods is you're turning the lights on to something that never left you. It's you're already in the thick of it. And then your potential is realized because now you're accessing something that has always been there. And so when you explain it, a lot of students always go, I can't believe it. When we're in this particular practice, you were transmitting Lao Tzu teaching us something, and before he was able to call in the energy, before I heard words coming out of your mouth of what was being brought in, I was experiencing it viscerally through my body, and that's part of the effect. And then you have this aha moment going, you can't make this up. He didn't say anything, yet it was already happening to me. Then he called in this energy and it was present because you're developing these skills. And that charge you're getting right now with excitement going, did I get my answer? Were my prayers answered when I was like, I want some more potential. I want to develop more skills. Of course it was. You threw it out to the universe, God, and God said, hey, let's give you more potential. Take these practices. San Qing can show you them and use them to your own advantage. And that's really what this is about. And it's long past the you know what, if you sit here and you listen and you stay in the lotus. I've had students that have gone to China and Japan and sat in temples in silence for 3, 5, 10 years and got nothing more than a back pain. And in 5 minutes, the potential of the teachings of Lao Tzu and the three pure ones, and they're feeling more energy and more energetic potential than they ever have throughout their own spiritual journey. And I'm like, listen, everything happens perfectly at the right time.
Right.
Nothing is wasted. And people tend to go, they get this regret and disappointment of their human experience going, oh man, why didn't I know this 20 years ago or 50 years ago or whatever it is? You're exhibiting and following the path that is perfect for you right now. And everything perfectly moved together for you to experience this. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. That's the no other point of view works. Where you are now is just where you're supposed to be. You know how I know? I'm here now. So nothing else would make sense. Fascinating.
Well, this has been then an incredible conversation, part one of many.
I hope so. That'll be really good. I'll send you some pictures of the pyramids on Mars
Mm-hmm.
and some other information about Mars. I think you'll find it fascinating. And this 8200, I think there's a good chance that Earthlings came from people who left Mars. Their planet seems like it was destroyed millions of years ago. One guy thinks there was a nuclear explosion, but that was even before. Joe thinks it was dust storms that were so bad they couldn't live there anymore. And if they were advanced enough and they were looking for a place to go, Earth would be a natural. And there are stories of ancient people, Sumerians and people like that, who talk about meeting people. Hey, the stories in the Bible about flying saucer-like things. So,
Yeah, I mean, Lao Tzu makes it very clear to me that every planet, just as Earth, has ambassadors and life form.
okay.
There's not an exception. This is something that's really important. Part of the human journey of realization and raising humanity, as this is what we are doing as human beings, is identifying with that. That's the purpose of a human being within on this planet, is to be the ambassador, to raise humanity, to create this resonance that is identified as love, and that all this other stuff will fall away and it will enrich planet Earth. Now, every single planet in the universe has ambassadors like us nurturing that planet in one way, shape, or form. Now, whether it's on the surface or inside it, they are present. And that
What about having
will be realized.
how about having been there in the past but not there now? Does that count?
Yes, but he's very clear that every planet has life force, every single one. There's no exception. Whether you see it through through a telescope, or you see, or it's realized internally, there is a life. You will find life force everywhere.
Everywhere. Life is so strong. It wants to exist. And I don't know why they were surprised when they found life on the surface of Mars. So if you would be open, would you do it yourself, or would you ask Lao to do a reading on whether or what the form of life is on Mars now?
Yeah, no, we can get that information from him. Absolutely. I mean, I always remember this. I don't I don't know anything. And that's the way you get information. That's how fast you can filter it and quickly obtain information, is accepting you know nothing. I'm as dumb as rocks.
And so when you go, I'm a dumb rock too. When you get down to the zone, I can just remember it that way. The woo wee. Are you with Lao then?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So you're always channeling.
Yeah, I'm always channeling. You got to remember, Jane Emperor always reminds people of this, one of my teachers. All thoughts of your mind are not yours. And people like go, whoa, well, whose are they? Well, that's an interesting question now, isn't it?
That is. But we are one. The first channeling I ever experienced was Seth. Do you remember the books by Roberts? And she channeled a person named Seth. And it was very good. I mean, you all the spiritual people and the channelists who are trying to teach us basically say so many of the similar things.
Well, it's kind of like important, like, for example, the state of the world. Right now, people are exhibiting this messaging that there's death and destruction, we're coming to an end, an apocalypse, all this kind of stuff. Now, at the beginning of the year, a lot of people would come to me and go, well, what does Lao Tzu say? What does he say? And he literally starts with the first time he spoke on that very question at the beginning of the year, it was really quite funny. He's got quite a sense of humor.
Mm-hmm.
He said, imagine that you are like a grain of sand, asking the beach, what are we doing today? Fall back into the beach and be realized.
Okay.
And I was just like, you can't make this stuff up. This is blowing my mind.
Great line.
And he speaks on the evidence of the transmission from the sun being 9 times more powerful than ever in human history, that is going to reverberate through the earth and raise the collective consciousness. So it's exhibiting that, mirroring it from the moon, because within Taoism, the primordial mother is the true source of all things. And so when this transmission from the sun, I've had many people speak about Schumann resonance on this channel, and I'm aware of it. You're probably aware of it yourself. Now, that measure of the actual field, the magnetic field of the Earth, and what that really means. What does that mean? There's a general measure of that could be correlated to the brain waves of a human being, and that we sort of, without the obstruction of emotional content, you could mimic that, and it sort of sits within a 7 to 8 hertz sort of like resonance. And so the Schumann resonance varies from that, but the evidence of what I speak of, where it's raising that consciousness, is that Lao Tzu was talking about it getting up to a state of 40 to 60 hertz within the next 12 to 24 months. Right. And so there's also evidence of manipulation of the hertz on planet Earth around the 12 to 18 hertz, which would be more exhibiting a beta brainwave, which would create more anxiety and fear. And so a lot of these people that are reading that are going, yes, that's exactly. How did you know that? I don't know anything. Lao Tzu was just telling me this is what's going to transpire. And unfortunately, the death and destruction part is not part of the equation. So all the brimstone and fire coming out of the sky, he's like, I hate to disappoint you, but that is not going to happen. And I'm like, the sobering part, Marty, is when you watch this stuff and you get information like that, and you watch it unfold that way, you go, holy moly, because it goes against the grain of the narrative, which is what some people might call a psyop, because you start feeding into the same information and you start melding your mind and just start believing, well, fear is the first thing. Now, Lao Tzu will always teach you this. If you come from a place of fear, you do not come from a place of knowing. If you come from a place of fear, you do not come from a place of manifestation. If you come from a place of fear, you do not come from a place of magic. Now, magic within Taoism is like an intricate architect sort of version of manifestation, but basically bringing things right down to a dot, crossing a T, all this type of detailed information for a magical spell or whatnot. That's what magic, Taoist magic is. And so you're just taking much deeper layered movement of the energy so that it creates a prescribed outcome. And that's what Taoist magic is. And it's very much fundamentally founded on the karmic model of the human.
Mm-hmm.
So that means that if you're in fear, you're going to be subject to manipulation. You are, if you're in fear and you're emotional, you're suggestible. That's the whole point of it. It's like, this is how people manipulate people within this space. Does that make sense?
Well, not only makes sense, we can see it happening today. And you talk about the manipulation, and you're saying there's more energy in this 12 to 20. Again, I don't remember exactly.
12 to 24 months. The actual hertz frequency is going to rise to a 40 to 60. That means that everyone's highly 100% conscious.
And that'll be healthy in the next. Wow.
Well, yeah. And you can start to see exhibit traits of that.
Even
though,
okay.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Is it the sun?
The sun is affecting the earth,
which is going to raise
it 9 times the 9 times the frequency than ever in human history. And so a lot of people are telling me about from a astrological perspective, they're like that. Well, yeah, we're getting all these different things, solar flares and all this stuff. I don't get into the semantics. I just repeat whatever he shares with me. And you just happen to go, holy moly, that makes complete sense with what's going on here. And when I interview Schumann resonant scientists that read this material, they go, "How did you know this?" Well, I don't know anything. The guy just gives me information, and it correlates to this. So
12 to 24 months. Well, that's the best news I've heard in a very long time.
Right. Because everyone's expecting imminent demise and death and destruction in the next couple of months of
World War III. That's what they're talking about.
Right. Well, you're going to find, and he said this several weeks ago, there is not going to be, there's this political agenda, blue and red and whatnot, whatever it is, I'm not really concerned about. But because of the manipulators within the world stratosphere, the world stage, they are in fear, which makes them subject to the manipulation of the potential of this, I'm just going to call it red energy. And because of the potential of the red energy, they are going to curtail what they might want to perpetrate on planet Earth, because they don't know the outcome of what is coming up. And because they don't know the outcome, if they go ahead and do things where this energy becomes more controlling, they're going to be in a lot of trouble, because this energy is going to make them pay. And I'm like, this sounds just bizarre to me. But from a standpoint of this whole landscape, I'm like, you look at this stuff, and I'm just like, I cannot watch news. I cannot watch any. I don't want to. I don't want to know about it. What I do want to know is that people are coming together, and they're not separating, as it would seem, from a world stage within what's going on within Israel, all this type of horrible stuff. You would instantly fall into the fate of, this is going to be horrible. This it can't get any better. But instantly you watch, Iran will not, and this is the thing that he said, because I was like, oh my goodness, we're going to have this incredible Middle Eastern devastation that's going to ripple through everything. They've backed off. They
have already a little bit, yeah.
And Lao Tzu said that 2 weeks ago, or last week, or whenever it happened. Whenever the event happened, I was like, oh my goodness. And he's like, don't worry about it. They're not going anywhere. I'm like, really? You want to give me some more information on this? And they're like, no, they're going to back off, because they are not clear on the outcome of where the world is heading
from this political landscape. And because of that, they do not want to take the risk. And that goes for every player within the game, whether it's China, Russia, or anything. They will not attempt to step out of their boundaries because they don't know the outcome. All I'm doing is sharing the information. I just know that I've been doing this for so long that my probability is extremely high, Marty. And it keeps repeating itself. So I don't ever question it. It's like, holy moly. This is, and it goes against the grain of what's going on right now with the fear and peddling. You know, the fear and peddling is, you know, death and destruction everywhere, financial system collapse, apocalypse, the whole thing. And it's a tiring narrative. And that the potential of what this energy brings, the red energy, I'm just going to call it, is an expansive energy. You can feel that.
Mm-hmm.
It's an expansive energy. And that's how I look at the potential. And so when people get a reading from Lao Tzu, he's very clear on speaking about the energetic potential. And it's strange because he'll give someone the peak of their energetic potential through the course of a 30-day period. And literally people always come back and go, on that day, I had 5 amazing things happen to me. I was reunited with a friend I hadn't seen in 30 years. Someone dropped $1 million in my bank account, all these things. And it's just about identifying the energy.
Right. And identifying, it's interesting, the word manipulating, because right now we are being so manipulated by the popular press. And that's your vibrational there. And yet it's going to start changing. The Trump win will be the major change. And that then is going to lead to what you talk about.
Well, all you got to do is
which and you may not be able to answer this because they all come together. I mean, it isn't like Trump is going to make the vibrational red energy go up, but it's sort of part of the whole process. Is that right? Am I looking at that? But that's the way I look at it. Everything is this connected process.
It's about fortifying and reestablishing the very fundamentals of a fluid ecosystem within Earth.
Right.
And that has to do with maintaining a level of humanity, empathy for life, which is not valued in other parts of the world.
No.
And that connection of that energy is reflected of that. You know, I believe America is still the number one place to live for your ability to actually be valued as an individual, as a human being. There's so much evidence of people, bad actors, falling into this and diminishing the value of humanity for their greater good of power and money.
Right.
And so you see that. I don't know. That's what I've noticed.
And we're seeing some now that Elon Musk, you know, he must have an angel guiding him. I mean, you know, there's a guy with a lot of money and he just puts it in good places, including starting X. So there are some good people out there, and maybe more and more of them will be turned to do what they see as good things. I mean, they got enough money. And so what do they do with it? They must run out of doing, you know, parties, and maybe as they get older, they'll get.
You'll find this funny, right? 2 failed students of Tony Robbins' mind-melting, hijacking, manipulating your nervous system and your mind through NLP. 2 failed students happen to be Gavin Newsom and Barack Obama.
I love it. You're right. I love it.
You know, and because if you could identify, if you understand the fundamentals of that, just all politicians attempt to apply this manipulation on their audience. So it's what they call pacing and leading, right? So I don't know whether you're familiar with that term, but it's a tonality that comes with it. I would like to talk to you today. about the state of the economy. And what happens is, just like if you're emotional, you fall into that pace. Within a few seconds, you become in this hypnotic trance, and everything gets fed into your unconscious. And before you know it, you're running for the hills in fear of death and destruction because you have been programmed. And this happens with your eyes open.
Obama had that skill for sure. He could hypnotize people. I don't think.
Oh no. They're terrible. I mean, just the current, the two political spheres. You can see that, Trump does it just because of the way he talks, and you listen, but it's substantive. It's got substance. The other person is attempting to do it, but they can't get a handle on it. They can't. They don't know. They're missing. They were not taught correctly on how to approach this stuff.
But the neuro, and not Tony Robbins, the general NLP, I think it is.
Neuro-linguistic programming. Yeah.
I mean, it works. And the popular media are using it over and over again. What's awful about it that people don't find, and I have some good liberal friends. Problem is they've always been liberal, and you just can't change them. The inertia is too large, plus the never Trump, and they're stuck with that.
Well, it's a hatred that you should have for nobody.
Right.
No place, person, or thing. But when you ask someone, why do you hate this person so much, they can't give you an answer.
Exactly.
Which is part of how brainwashed they've been.
And I asked the person, very bright about that, and he gave me 3 things. Raped this person, supposedly, mostly stuff with women, said terrible things. I said, don't all politicians get accused of doing stuff like that? Didn't matter. It was Trump. Anyway.
Yeah, it's a phenomenon. It's a phenomenon. But if you understand the synchronicity and serendipity of what you call the flow, the wu wei, that guy has the wu wei. That guy is beyond the wu wei. And, it's funny. You ask someone, what's the first book that he read? The book that he holds true to his very heart. You know what that book is, right?
What? No.
The Power of Positive Thinking.
Okay.
It's phenomenal how just something as simplistic as that, regardless of his rhetoric, as his personality, he is attuned with an energy that just continually moves him wherever. It just doesn't matter. You just go, holy moly, and that will come back to his faith in God.
Well, for forever, I've always felt the problems of humanities. So how are we going to turn the hatred that Muslims have, most, not all, but most, against Jews, their desire to destroy Israel? How do you turn that around?
Well, you look at the probability of the rest of planet Earth, and that frequency will be raised. People like yourself, myself, the collective Tom, millions and millions and millions of people are coming to this very heightened state of awareness, and that has an effect. There's no question. If you can affect with telekinesis moving a piece of foil, your thought forms affect immediately the state around you, and you'll find that as your resonance increases, Marty, you will find that the dualistic experience of planet Earth will be subject. So when you walk into a room, people will love you or hate you. It's that simple, because of how high your frequency is. And so people will be confronted with it, and they'll go, I just don't like the way that person makes me feel, instead of realizing you're not making anyone feel anything. You're just bringing a resonance that has the effect of like rattling the cage of the individual. That stagnated emotion is being emerged as something present within their mind as an emotional state. And so, this is how you heal when you identify with that and you don't attach it to a place, person, or thing, is realizing that that's all it is.
Okay, well, hopefully we'll see a significant move in that direction in the next 12 to 24 months, which is what you said. It's not going to be, it's one of those things that's never going to be perfect.
Yeah, but we're talking a high, right now the Earth goes from 7.5 hertz and is being manipulated through the emission of some of these human resonance scientists that I've spoken to that read that, and they're talking about it being manipulated to the 12 to 18 hertz. There is another foreign energy that is manipulating that, so it's creating the fear aspect.
ETs, presumably.
That they weren't clear on that. Now, personally, from what I can see, from what Lao Tzu is showing me, this is man-made, that altering effect, not from outside of this planet. It's being altered within the planet by other bad actors.
Okay. Well, that certainly could be, though. Yeah, if there's so much fear around, I guess that helps the people who know they're the ultimate source of it in some way. So, but in 12 to 24 months, that frequency is going to be raised, not by those actors, either other actors or enough people like us.
That's coming from the sun.
Okay. That frequency, okay, so that was when you connected it to the power of the sun. Yeah, we think we're so powerful. Earth itself and the sun, they've got all the energy. But being able to tap into that, of course, is what we're learning to do. That's fascinating. Wonderful. Are you interested in learning more about Mars? I mean, I don't want to.
Yes. I'm going to take a deeper dive into it, my friend. I'm going to take a deeper dive into it, and I'll share with you what Lao Tzu brings forth, and get you on your path of cultivation, get you looking deeper into your own self-evident practices, because that's really important.
That's perfect. That's perfect.
Well, this has been amazing today.
And that's how I feel too. Well, I'm glad you said that. I certainly feel that. And,
incredible. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put all your social media under this podcast. And of course, we have our incredible event coming up in October. I'm going to publish that and make sure that everyone's aware of that conference. And we're going to share more mind-altering conscious awareness. Yeah.
We just have to educate people to the way or equivalent.
The way, my friend. Well, in closing, I'm going to ask you, what is your definition of consciousness?
Consciousness is fundamental, so you can't give a definition in something less fundamental. However, it is something you know, and you know it in every now moment.
Yes. Oh, that's beautiful. In hundreds of podcasts, I've never heard the same answer. And that's perfect for right now.
Yeah.
I
mean, the now moment is the thing which we have. Your life is made up of a whole series of now moments. You can remember past ones, but you remember them in this now moment.
Yes.
And you could, quote, remember future ones, which you remember in this now moment. So the now moment is key, and this is where consciousness plays in the physical world.
Presence, right here, right now.
Exactly.
Well, this has been beautiful, my friend. I'm so grateful that you spent time with me today and sharing in this incredible journey.
And namaste. Thank you for sharing all that you shared.
Beautiful, my friend. I want to thank you. I want to thank the universe for bringing you into my life. I want to thank the audience for sharing their time with us today. And I am your humble servant and Sifu, Taoist Master San Qing. And I'll see you on the next one, guys.